It was a bright, peaceful morning in the small city of Atlanta. The sun had just started to rise, painting the sky with soft orange and pink colors. The streets were slowly coming alive, cars honking, people rushing to work, and the smell of freshly baked bread filling the air from nearby cafes. In the middle of all this stood a cozy little restaurant called the Golden Spoon Diner. It wasn't fancy, but it had something better: warmth, laughter, and the kind of comfort that made every customer feel at home. Inside, Amara Johnson, a young black waitress in her late 20s, tied her apron and got ready for another long day. She had been working at the Golden Spoon for almost 5 years. Every regular customer knew her name. Some called her Sunshine because she always had a bright smile on her face no matter how busy or stressful the day was. Amara was the kind of person who could make anyone feel welcome, even strangers walking in for the first time. She lived a simple life. Every morning, she woke up before sunrise, made coffee for herself and her little brother Malik, and then took the old city bus to work. Her mother had passed away a few years earlier, so Amara became both a sister and a guardian to Malik, who was still in high school. It wasn't easy balancing everything: bills, rent, groceries, and school expenses, but Amara never complained. She believed in hard work and honesty. Those two things, she often said, were worth more than money. The diner was already filling up when she started her shift. The smell of bacon and pancakes floated through the air, and the sound of sizzling oil came from the kitchen where Chef Tony, a chubby man with a loud laugh, shouted orders. "Table 3 wants extra syrup, Amara," he called. She laughed and shouted back, "Coming right up, Tony." Their friendly banter always made the morning lighter. The Golden Spoon was the kind of place where people came for more than just food. Some came to talk about their lives, others came to escape the noise of the city. There was Mr. Brown, an old retired teacher who sat by the window every morning reading his newspaper. Miss Clara, a nurse who always ordered black coffee before her hospital shift, and a group of construction workers who loved teasing Amara just to see her roll her eyes and laugh. As Amara moved from table to table, balancing plates of pancakes, eggs, and coffee mugs, she smiled at everyone. Her job wasn't easy: long hours, sore feet, and rude customers sometimes. But she found joy in it. Every thank you, every friendly smile from a stranger reminded her why she kept going. She had dreams too. She wanted to open her own cafe one day, a small place where everyone would feel loved and respected, no matter who they were. Around 10 a.m., the breakfast rush began. The bell on the door kept ringing as more customers walked in. Amara's coworker, Lena, whispered, "Girl, it's going to be one of those days." Amara just grinned and said, "Then let's make it a good one." She carried plates, refilled coffee cups, wiped tables, and made small talk with the regulars. Her cheerful energy made the whole diner feel alive, but behind that smile, Amara was tired. She hadn't had a day off in over a week. Rent was due soon. Malik's school needed a small fee for his science project, and the tips lately hadn't been great. Still, she pushed through. Complaining wouldn't change her situation, only effort would. And she had plenty of that. At one point, she looked outside through the diner's large window. Across the street, she saw a fancy black limousine stop in front of a boutique. A man in a suit stepped out, followed by 2 bodyguards. Must be nice to live like that, she thought with a small sigh. But then she smiled to herself and whispered, "One day I'll have my own car. Maybe not a limo, but something that gets me to work on time." She laughed softly and went back to work. By late morning, the diner was full. The sound of laughter, clinking cutlery, and the smell of fresh coffee created a comforting buzz. Everything seemed normal, just another day in Amara's hardworking life. She didn't know that within the next few hours, her world was going to change completely. Her kindness, patience, and courage, things she practiced every day without expecting anything in return, were about to be tested in a way she never imagined. But for now, she was just Amara, the smiling waitress with tired feet and a heart full of hope, serving plates of pancakes and dreams in a small corner of the city. She walked past Mr. Brown, who looked up from his newspaper and said, "Morning, Sunshine." Amara smiled warmly. "Morning, Mr. Brown. How's that crossword coming along?" He chuckled. "Slower than your coffee refills." She laughed, shaking her head, and hurried to top off his cup. Little did she know that in just a few hours, Her name would be whispered by everyone in the diner, not just as a waitress, but as a woman who stood her ground. But right now she was simply living her ordinary morning. A morning filled with the scent of coffee, the hum of voices, and the quiet strength of a woman who didn't yet realize that destiny was already walking toward her. The day had been moving smoothly at the Golden Spoon Diner. The breakfast rush had passed, and things were finally calming down. The chatter had softened. The clinking of spoons against cups was gentle now, and Amara finally had a chance to take a slow breath. She leaned against the counter for a moment, sipping a bit of cold coffee from her mug. Her feet ached, but her heart was light. Slow hours like this are a blessing, she said to Lena, who was stacking napkins nearby. Lena nodded. Yeah, before the lunch crowd hits and Tony starts yelling again, she said with a laugh. Amara smiled. She loved moments like this, quiet, ordinary, peaceful. But peace, as she was about to learn, never lasts forever. Just then, the sound of a car engine roared outside the diner. Not the usual city sound, and this one was deep, powerful, expensive. Through the glass door, Amara saw a sleek black sports car pull up right in front. It gleamed like a mirror under the sunlight, and when the doors opened, 3 men stepped out, all dressed in sharp suits, all wearing dark sunglasses, all carrying the kind of confidence that could fill a room before they even entered it. The man in the center stood out immediately. He was tall, handsome, and young, maybe in his early 30s. His watch gleamed like gold, and he walked as if the ground itself owed him something. The kind of man used to being obeyed, admired, and never questioned. His name was Ethan Rowe, the heir to one of the richest business empires in the country. But of course, Amara didn't know that yet. To her, he was just another customer. The diner door opened, and the small brass bell above it jingled sweetly, the same way it did for everyone. But somehow this time even that sound felt different. Every head in the diner turned as the 3 men entered. Conversation stopped for a moment. People stared, not because they recognized him, but because he looked so out of place. The Golden Spoon was a family diner. Regular folks, working people, students, that's who came here. Not billionaires in designer suits. Ethan looked around with a smirk, whispering something to his friends that made them laugh. Then, as if on cue, they chose the biggest booth in the center, the one by the window where everyone could see them. Amara straightened her apron and grabbed a notepad. Customers are customers, she reminded herself softly. No matter who they were, everyone deserved the same kindness. She walked toward the table with her usual warm smile. Good afternoon, gentlemen, she greeted. Welcome to the Golden Spoon Diner. What can I get you today? Ethan leaned back, looking her up and down in a way that made her skin crawl, though she didn't show it. Well, he said slowly, his voice smooth but heavy with arrogance. Why don't you tell me what's good here? Amara smiled politely. Our pancakes and fried chicken are customer favorites. Or, if you're in the mood for something lighter, we have fresh salads and... He interrupted her, waving a dismissive hand. No, I mean you tell me what's good, he said, grinning. His friends laughed again. Amara's smile didn't fade, but her eyes hardened slightly. She dealt with this type before. Men who thought their money gave them permission to treat people however they wanted. Still, she stayed professional. Everything on our menu is made fresh daily, she said calmly. Would you like a few minutes to decide? Ethan tilted his head, clearly enjoying the power he thought he had. Sure, sweetheart. Take your time, he said. As Amara walked away, she heard his friends snickering behind her. She ignored it, focusing instead on her next table. But inside, a small flame of irritation began to spark. At the counter, Lena whispered, Did you see those guys? They look like they just walked out of a movie. Amara nodded. Yeah, the kind where the villain always wears a fancy suit. They both laughed softly, but Amara couldn't shake the uneasy feeling settling in her chest. There was something about Ethan, not just his arrogance, but his emptiness. Like a man who had everything but still needed to make others feel small just to remind himself he mattered. After a few minutes, she returned to their table. Are you ready to order? She asked. Ethan leaned forward. I think I am, he said. I'll take your number. The words hung in the air. His friends burst into laughter. The nearby customers glanced over, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Amara froze for a brief second, then took a deep breath. Sorry, sir, she said, her tone firm but polite. That's not on the menu. The laughter around the diner faded. Ethan stared at her, surprised by her composure. Most people either flirted back or apologized nervously, but Amara stood there, calm, confident, and completely unbothered. He smirked. "You've got attitude." "I like that." She didn't respond. Instead, she wrote down his order like nothing had happened. 1 steak sandwich and fries. "Thank you." Then she turned and walked away, her back straight, her head high. Behind her, Ethan's smile faltered just a little. He wasn't used to being ignored, especially not by someone he looked down on. From that moment, something changed in the air. What had started as an ordinary lunch service was quietly turning into a storm, one that would test Amara's courage in ways she'd never imagined. And outside, the sun continued to shine, innocent and unaware, over a small diner where fate had just walked through the door wearing an expensive suit and an arrogant smile. The clock ticked toward noon, and the diner was buzzing again. The smell of roasted chicken, fries, and coffee filled the air. Customers chatted, silverware clinked, and the small radio behind the counter played a soft jazz tune. But at one particular booth, and the one near the window, the mood was different. The laughter that came from that table wasn't friendly. It was loud, sharp, and full of arrogance. Amara carried a tray of food toward their table, her steps calm, but her senses alert. She had already noticed the way Ethan and his 2 friends had been watching her, not with respect but with amusement, as if she were part of their entertainment for the day. Still, she held her composure. She'd faced worse. "Here you go, gentlemen," she said politely as she placed the plates down. 1 steak sandwich, 1 grilled chicken, and 1 double burger with extra cheese. Ethan leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand, watching her closely. "You've got a nice voice," he said casually. "Ever thought of doing something more glamorous than this?" Amara smiled politely. "I'm happy where I am, sir." "Really?" he asked, a smirk curling at the edge of his lips. "Serving food to people like me? You deserve better. I could get you a job. Something where you don't have to lift trays all day." His friends chuckled. One of them added, "Yeah, Ethan's good at helping girls, especially pretty ones." Amara's hand tightened around her notepad, but she said nothing. She just replied in her calm, steady tone, "Thank you, but I'm fine here." She turned to leave. "Wait," Ethan said. His voice carried authority, the kind of tone used to getting its way. "At least sit with us for a minute." "I promise I don't bite." Amara stopped and turned slightly. "I'm sorry, sir, but I have other tables to serve." That should have been the end of it. But Ethan wasn't used to being told no. The rejection burned his pride more than he expected. He leaned back in his seat, watching her walk away, and muttered something to his friends. They laughed again, but this time it was louder, meant for her to hear. Minutes later, Amara came back with a pitcher of water to refill their glasses. As she leaned slightly over the table, Ethan reached out, too close, too casually, brushing his fingers against her wrist. Amara froze. For a second, the world went quiet. The sound of the radio, the chatter, even the clinking of forks, everything seemed to stop. She looked at him, her eyes cold but steady. "Please don't do that again," she said softly but firmly. Ethan raised an eyebrow, pretending to be innocent. "Do what?" "I was just trying to get your attention." "You already had it, sir," she replied, straightening up. "And now you've lost it." A few nearby customers had started to notice. Lena, who was wiping a table across the room, paused and frowned. Tony peeked from the kitchen window, sensing the tension. Ethan laughed, but it was an awkward laugh. Forced, sharp. "Come on, don't be so serious." "I was just joking." Amara didn't smile. "I don't think harassment is a joke," she said clearly, her voice carrying through the diner. The entire place went silent. Even the radio seemed to quiet down. Ethan's friends shifted uncomfortably, unsure what to say. One of them whispered, "Man, maybe chill out." But Ethan wasn't used to feeling small, and her calm defiance made him furious. "You're lucky to even have a job like this," he snapped. "Do you know who I am?" Amara crossed her arms. "A customer," she said, steady as stone. "And in this diner, that's all that matters. But if you can't respect the people serving you, you can leave." Gasps rippled through the room. No one ever talked to rich men like that. Ethan's face turned red, not from embarrassment, but from rage. "You think you can talk to me like that?" He hissed. "You have no idea what kind of power I have. I could buy this place in a second and fire you before you even take off that apron. Amara didn't flinch. Then go ahead, she said quietly. But right now I'm the one asking you to leave. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. The kind of weight that silences even the arrogant. She turned to the manager, who had come out after hearing the commotion.
He's harassing me, she said simply. The manager, a middle-aged man named Carl, looked nervous.
He knew who Ethan Rowe was. Everyone did. But then he looked at Amara, her eyes calm, her hands steady, and something in her composure gave him courage. Sir, Carl said carefully, I think it's best if you leave. Ethan stood up, knocking over his chair. You'll regret this, he shouted. All of you! Amara didn't move. She just stood there watching him with quiet dignity. As he stormed out, the bell above the door rang again, this time not as a welcoming sound, but as the closing note of a fight for respect. For a long moment no one spoke. Then an elderly man at the corner table, Mr. Brown, started clapping. Slowly others joined in. Amara blinked in surprise, her heart pounding. She hadn't done it for attention. She hadn't done it to be brave. She had simply done what was right. Lena rushed over and whispered, Girl, that was incredible. Amara smiled faintly, trying to steady her breath. Just another day at the Golden Spoon, she said quietly, even though deep down she knew this day was far from over. Outside, the sound of distant thunder echoed, but it wasn't from the sky. It was the sound of rotor blades approaching. Something or someone was coming, and Amara's life was about to change forever. The bell above the door had stopped ringing, but the silence it left behind was heavy. The air inside the Golden Spoon felt tense, thick with whispers, wide eyes, and quiet disbelief. Ethan Rowe, the arrogant billionaire's son, had just stormed out, slamming the glass door so hard that the windows rattled. His untouched plate of food sat on the table like a monument to his pride. Amara stood still for a moment, her hands trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from adrenaline. Her heart thumped in her chest faster than she wanted it to. Around her, people murmured softly, a mix of shock and admiration in their voices. Lena rushed to her side. Amara, are you okay? Amara nodded slowly. Yeah, I think so. Her voice was calm, but her fingers betrayed her, twitching slightly as she held her notepad. From behind the counter, Chef Tony peeked out, wiping his hands on a towel. What on earth just happened out here? Carl, the manager, sighed. The customer crossed a line, he said, his tone serious. And Amara handled it. Tony frowned. Handled it? She just took on a billionaire's kid. You know who his father is? I don't care who his father is, Amara said quietly. She looked down at her uniform. A bit of water splashed, her name tag slightly crooked, and straightened it. Right is right. Wrong is wrong. That's all I care about. Her words carried softly, but they reached every corner of the diner. Some of the customers nodded. Mr. Brown, the old teacher by the window, smiled proudly and lifted his coffee cup toward her like a silent salute. Carl rubbed the back of his neck. You know, Amara, if he reports this, we could be in trouble. His family owns half the city. Amara looked at him with calm eyes. And what about respect, Carl? Do they own that too? He had no answer. For a moment, even the humming of the refrigerator in the corner felt louder than the silence between them. Finally, Carl sighed and said, You did the right thing. She smiled faintly. Thank you. Then taking a deep breath, she went back to work. That was Amara, unshaken, unbent, and unwilling to let anything steal her grace. She walked around, cleaning tables, refilling cups, acting as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But inside she knew it wasn't over. People like Ethan didn't take humiliation quietly. Outside, through the diner's wide windows, the street glowed under the early afternoon sun. Cars passed by, unaware of the storm that had just begun brewing. Lena watched her friend move gracefully from table to table and whispered, I don't know how you do it. I'd still be shaking, Amara smiled gently. You can't let fear live rent-free in your heart, she said. If you do, it'll move in and never leave. Her words made Lena pause, then nod slowly. For the next half hour, the diner slowly returned to its rhythm. Conversations restarted. Forks clinked again, laughter returned, though softer now, more careful. But every once in a while, a customer would look at Amara and smile, a quiet acknowledgement of the strength they'd just witnessed. Then, suddenly, a low rumble filled the air. Not thunder, not a car. It was deeper, louder. The windows began to vibrate slightly. The sound grew, whump, 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 rhythmic and powerful. Everyone froze. A few people stepped toward the window. Outside, a gust of wind swept across the street, sending napkins flying off outdoor tables. Amara frowned and walked closer to the glass. Her hair whipped slightly as she opened the door. And then she saw it. A helicopter descending from the sky, sleek and black like a metal bird landing from another world. "What on earth?" Lena whispered behind her. The helicopter landed right across the street in the empty parking lot beside the diner. Dust and leaves swirled everywhere as the blade slowed. Then the door opened. Out stepped an older man, tall, silver-haired, dressed in an elegant gray suit. His presence commanded silence before he even spoke. Everyone inside the Golden Spoon recognized Power when they saw it, even if they didn't know his name. But Amara didn't have to guess. She knew. Ethan Rowe's father had arrived. People inside whispered anxiously, "That's Robert Rowe, isn't it? The billionaire? The man owns half the hotels in the state." Carl's face went pale. "Oh no, this is bad." Amara stayed by the doorway, calm but alert. Her heart pounded, yet she refused to step back. She had done nothing wrong. The man crossed the street slowly, his shoes gleaming, his coat fluttering slightly in the wind. His driver followed behind, carrying a briefcase. When he reached the entrance, he paused, taking a long look around the diner. His gaze was sharp, intelligent, not angry, but searching. "Who is Amara Johnson?" he asked, his voice deep and steady. Every head turned toward her. Amara stepped forward. "That's me," she said. Mr. Rowe studied her for a long moment. His eyes weren't cruel like his son's. They were observant, almost thoughtful. Finally, he nodded slightly. "I heard you threw my son out," he said. Amara swallowed but stood tall. "Yes, sir. He was disrespectful. I won't tolerate harassment from anyone." The diner went dead silent. For a moment, Mr. Rowe said nothing. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. "Just slightly, I see," he said softly. "And yet you're still standing here, calm, fearless." Amara didn't answer. He nodded again, almost to himself, then turned toward his driver. "Tell the pilot to wait." He looked back at Amara. "Miss Johnson, may I have a word with you?" Carl stepped forward nervously. "Sir, if this is about—" Mr. Rowe raised a hand. "Don't worry. It's not what you think." Amara looked at him, unsure what to expect, but one thing she knew for certain. She wasn't afraid. She took a deep breath and said, "Yes, sir. We can talk." And as she followed him outside, the other customers watched in awe. The woman who had just stood up for herself against a billionaire's son was now face to face with the billionaire himself. And she didn't flinch. For the first time that day, Amara wasn't just a waitress. She was a symbol of courage. The wind still whirled outside the Golden Spoon diner, carrying the scent of dust, fuel, and something electric, like the air right before a storm. The helicopter's blades were slowing, spinning with a steady rhythm that made everyone stop what they were doing. Even the sound of the city seemed to fade. Cars slowed down, people stared, and the entire block watched as the mysterious silver-haired man stepped closer to the diner door. Inside, Amara stood tall. Her apron fluttered gently in the draft from the open door. Customers whispered in disbelief, their eyes bouncing from the window to her face, wondering what would happen next. The man was Robert Rowe, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the country. To most people, he was a legend, the kind of man whose name appeared in newspapers beside words like billionaire, philanthropist, and power. But to Amara, he was simply the father of the man who had disrespected her. As he entered, the small bell above the door rang once again, softer this time, but the sound carried weight. Robert removed his sunglasses and looked around. His sharp gray eyes took in every detail. The cozy booths, the steaming coffee pots, the nervous faces. Then his gaze landed on Amara. She didn't step back. She didn't lower her eyes. She simply stood there, calm but alert, her chin slightly lifted, not in arrogance but in quiet dignity. Robert spoke first. "You're Amara Johnson?" "Yes, sir," she said, her voice steady. "I heard what happened here," he said. His tone wasn't angry, just controlled, like a man who had learned long ago that true power doesn't need to shout. "I'm sure you did," she replied, keeping her tone polite but firm. "Your son came here as a customer, but he forgot how to behave like one." The customers inside held their breath. Lena gripped the edge of the counter, her eyes wide. Robert studied Amara's face for a long moment. "And you threw him out?" "I asked him to leave," she said, her words clear. "Because he crossed a line." A long pause followed. The air felt heavy, like time itself had slowed down. Then, to everyone's surprise, Robert's expression softened. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "You remind me of my late wife," he said quietly. "She didn't tolerate disrespect either." The entire diner went silent. Amara blinked, caught off guard. She hadn't expected kindness or even understanding. "Sir, I didn't mean to cause trouble," she said finally. "But no job is worth my dignity." Robert nodded slowly. "No, it isn't, and you were right to stand your ground," people gasped. Even Carl, the manager, who had been sweating bullets at the corner, looked shocked. Robert continued, "My son was raised with everything: money, comfort, opportunity. But somewhere along the way, he forgot that those things don't make a man. Character does." He turned slightly toward the window where his helicopter waited in the sunlight, its blades now still. "When I heard what he did, I came here to see the kind of woman who had the courage to stand up to him." Amara felt a lump in her throat. No one had ever called her courageous before. She had only done what she thought was right, what any woman should do when faced with disrespect. Robert turned back to her. "Tell me, Miss Johnson, do you like working here?" She hesitated. "It's honest work," she said, "and I'm proud of that." He smiled gently. "That's a good answer. But I didn't ask if it was honest. I asked if you liked it." Amara looked around the diner. At the chipped counters, the tired lights, the worn-out floors that she'd cleaned 100 times. She thought about the long hours, the aching feet, the late-night bus rides home. "I like serving people," she said slowly. "I like making them smile, but yes, I dream of something more." Robert nodded as if he'd been waiting to hear those words. "Then maybe it's time you had that." From his coat pocket, he pulled out a business card and placed it gently on the counter. The card gleamed with gold lettering. "Row Hospitality Group," it read. "I own several restaurants and hotels," he said. "I'm looking for managers who know how to lead with grace and strength. I'd like to offer you a position." Amara stared at the card, speechless. "Sir, you don't have to do that." "I'm not doing it out of pity," Robert said firmly. "I'm doing it because good people deserve to rise, and because my son needs to learn what real respect looks like." He glanced at his driver, who nodded. "We'll arrange transportation for you to visit our office this week." "Think about it." Amara's heart raced. Around her, customers started whispering again, this time with excitement. "Did you hear that?" someone said softly. "He's offering her a job." Lena covered her mouth, her eyes shining. "Oh my God, Amara." But Amara didn't move. She took a slow breath, her eyes still on the card. "Sir, I appreciate the offer, truly, but why me?" Robert looked at her for a long moment. "Because you did something most people are too afraid to do," he said. "You stood up for yourself and you did it with dignity. That's the kind of strength money can't buy." He extended his hand. Amara hesitated only for a second before shaking it. His handshake was firm, respectful. "Thank you," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "No, Miss Johnson. Thank you." Then, with that same calm confidence, Robert turned and walked back toward the door. As he stepped outside, the sun reflected off the helicopter's polished surface, casting a golden glow across the diner floor. The customers clapped quietly, not because it was dramatic, but because it was beautiful. Amara stood there, holding the business card in her hand, her heart full. The sound of the helicopter blades started again, echoing through the sky as Robert Rowe lifted off, leaving behind a story no one in that diner would ever forget. And Amara, the waitress who had refused to be disrespected, realized something powerful that day. Sometimes, courage brings storms, but those same storms can lift you higher than you ever dreamed. The sound of the helicopter faded slowly into the sky, leaving behind a quiet hum in the air, a mix of disbelief and wonder. Inside the Golden Spoon diner, everything felt suspended in time. People still stared at the door as if expecting the billionaire to walk back in. The bell above it swayed slightly, the echo of its last chime blending with the soft clatter of cups on saucers. Amara stood motionless, holding the golden-edged business card between her fingers. It glimmered faintly in the sunlight streaming through the window. Her reflection on its surface looked unreal, like she was staring at a stranger. Lena was the first to speak. "Girl, did that really just happen?" Amara blinked as if waking up from a dream. I don't know," she whispered. "It feels like something out of a movie." Mr. Brown chuckled softly from his corner table. "If it's a movie, honey, you're the hero." The diner burst into gentle laughter, the kind that releases tension after a storm. Chef Tony came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands and shaking his head. "Amara, I've seen a lot of wild things in my years here, but that was something else." Carl, the manager, sighed with relief. "I thought we were all about to lose our jobs," he said with a weak smile. Amara finally smiled too, a real one this time. "So did I," she admitted. She tucked the card carefully into her apron pocket, not because of its gold letters, but because of what it represented: respect, recognition, and something she hadn't felt in a long time: possibility. The day carried on, though nothing felt ordinary anymore. Customers came and went, many of them still whispering about what they'd witnessed. Some even asked for selfies with Amara, laughing and saying, "We want a picture with the bravest waitress in Atlanta." She laughed shyly, her cheeks warm. She didn't like attention, but she couldn't deny that something inside her had changed. By evening, when the crowd thinned and the soft glow of sunset filled the diner, Amara finally sat down by the window with a cup of coffee. The street outside was calm again. The helicopter was long gone, but its presence lingered like a whisper. Then, just as she took a sip, the doorbell rang again. She looked up and froze. It was Ethan Rowe. He wasn't wearing his designer suit anymore. He looked different. His hair was a little messy, his face tired, his arrogance gone. For a moment, Amara didn't know whether to stand or stay seated. He hesitated at the door, scanning the diner. When he spotted her, he walked over slowly. The room fell silent again. Lena stopped wiping the counter. Even Tony peeked out from the kitchen window. When Ethan reached her table, he stopped a few feet away and spoke quietly. "Can we talk?" Amara looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Go ahead." He took a deep breath. "I'm sorry," he said. The words came out awkwardly, like they'd been trapped inside him for too long. "I shouldn't have treated you that way. I was drunk on my own ego. I thought I was untouchable." Amara said nothing. She simply listened, her face calm but unreadable. Ethan continued, his voice low. "When I told my father what happened, I expected him to defend me. Instead, he said I'd embarrassed the family name. Then he got on a helicopter and came here himself. I've never seen him do that for anyone before." Amara folded her hands on the table. "Maybe he just wanted to remind you that money doesn't make a man. Respect does." Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah, he said the same thing." He paused, looking at her. "He told me he offered you a job." She nodded. "He did, and?" he asked softly. "I haven't decided yet," she replied. "I don't want to take something out of pity or guilt. I want to earn it." Ethan looked down, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You already have. You earned everyone's respect today, and even mine." Those words surprised her more than the helicopter had. He reached into his jacket pocket and placed a small envelope on the table. "This isn't a bribe," he said quickly. "It's an apology. Inside is a letter from me and a personal recommendation from my father, in case you take the offer." Amara hesitated before picking it up. "Thank you," she said softly. Ethan exhaled deeply, as if a heavy weight had finally lifted off his chest. "You know," he said after a pause, "you're the first person who's ever told me no to my face. It's strange, but I think I needed that." Amara smiled gently. "Maybe that's how people learn, Mr. Rowe. Not through power, but through humility." He nodded. "Maybe so." He turned to leave, but before walking out, he looked back once more. "For what it's worth, I hope you take the job. People like you make the world better. People like me? We're still trying to catch up." Then he walked out quietly. No shouting this time, no arrogance, just quiet respect. When the door closed behind him, Amara sat still for a long moment, staring at the envelope in her hand. The golden light from the setting sun spilled across the table, making it glow. Lena walked up slowly and whispered, "What did he say?" Amara smiled faintly. He said sorry. Lena gasped. You made a billionaire's son apologize? Girl, you're unstoppable. Amara laughed softly. No, she said. Just honest. Outside, the sky deepened into shades of orange and purple. The city lights flickered on one by one, and Amara looked out at them with quiet hope. Life had tested her, but she hadn't broken. Instead, she had risen, with her head high, her heart strong and her dignity intact. And somewhere high above the city, another helicopter moved across the twilight sky, not as a symbol of power anymore, but of change. Amara didn't need its noise or its luxury. She already had something far greater: respect, peace, and the beginning of a brand new chapter she had earned with her own courage. Morning sunlight spilled through the diner's wide front windows, casting soft golden beams over the tables and booths. The Golden Spoon Diner looked the same as always: the scent of coffee and pancakes, the sound of the doorbell jingling, and the hum of the city waking up outside. But something felt different. The people inside had changed, and so had Amara. A week had passed since that unforgettable day, the day when courage met privilege and changed everything. Life inside the diner had returned to normal, but the whispers hadn't stopped. New customers had begun showing up, not just for the food, but to meet her. The waitress who had stood up to a billionaire's son and earned the respect of his powerful father. Some brought flowers. Some left kind notes, and some just wanted to shake her hand. Amara accepted it all with quiet humility. She never boasted, never acted like a hero. To her, it wasn't about fame, and it was about self-respect. She didn't see herself as someone who had fought a man with power. She saw herself as someone who had defended her peace. That morning, as she brewed the first pot of coffee, Lena leaned on the counter, grinning. You know, it's still all over the news, she said. People online are calling you the fearless waitress. Amara chuckled softly, shaking her head. I'm just a woman who wanted to finish her shift without being disrespected. Yeah, but apparently that's rare enough to make headlines, Lena said, laughing. You even went viral on TikTok. Someone recorded part of what happened. Amara groaned playfully. Oh no, please tell me it's not me kicking him out. Oh, it's definitely that part, Lena said with a wink. You look like a boss. Amara smiled, her eyes drifting toward the small framed photo hanging on the wall. One of her and her little brother Malik. That picture reminded her why she worked so hard. Everything she did for him. Just then, the doorbell jingled again. Amara looked up and froze. Standing at the doorway was Robert Rowe, once again in his gray suit, though this time without the helicopter fanfare. He carried a briefcase in one hand and a warm smile on his face. Good morning, Miss Johnson, he said, stepping inside. Amara quickly wiped her hands on her apron and walked over. Mr. Rowe, she greeted politely. I wasn't expecting to see you again. He nodded. I don't like unfinished business, he said. May I? He gestured toward a booth. Of course, she replied. Lena whispered to herself. Oh my God. He's back, before pretending to busy herself behind the counter. Robert sat down, setting his briefcase gently on the table. How have you been? He asked. Busy, Amara said with a soft laugh. Famous, apparently. But still working hard. That's good, Robert replied. Fame fades. Integrity doesn't. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. I came to give you something, he said. It's an official offer. Management position at the Silver Oak Bistro. It's one of my company's top restaurants in the city. You'll have your own team, full benefits, and a salary that reflects your worth. Amara stared at the papers, her heart racing. She hadn't expected him to come back, and certainly not in person. Mr. Rowe, she began softly. I don't know what to say. He smiled kindly. Say yes. You've earned this, Amara. You didn't just stand up for yourself, you reminded everyone watching that dignity matters more than money. That's the kind of leadership I want in my company. Her throat tightened. For a moment words failed her. Then she finally said, I accept. Robert's eyes glimmered. Excellent. You start next week. There's a driver who will help you settle in, and... He hesitated for a moment as if choosing his next words carefully. My son will be there too, as part of his retraining program. Amara blinked in surprise. Ethan? He nodded. He's working under supervision now, learning the business from the ground up. It was his idea, actually. He wanted to prove he could change. Amara smiled faintly. Maybe we both learned something that day. Robert stood and extended his hand again. You have a bright future ahead, Miss Johnson. Never lose what makes you you. She shook his hand firmly. I won't, sir. Thank you for believing in me. He smiled warmly. No, Amara, thank you for reminding me what strength really looks like. With that, he left the diner, the soft chime of the doorbell marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Lena ran over as soon as he was gone. Don't tell me, you said yes, didn't you? Amara nodded, tears glimmering in her eyes. I did, Lena squealed and hugged her. You did it. You're moving up. Amara laughed through her tears. It doesn't feel real yet, but it was real. The following week, Amara walked into the Silver Oak Bistro wearing a crisp uniform and a quiet smile. The restaurant sparkled, marble floors, crystal lights, and customers dressed in elegance. Yet even here, surrounded by luxury, she carried the same warmth and humility she had at the Golden Spoon.